Oh.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us bang on time. It's much appreciated. We'll get started shortly, but in the meantime, if you could mute your microphones, that would be much appreciated, and we'll get started shortly. Thank you very much.
Why isn't it working?
So I think as people start to trickle in, we'll get started with the introductions before we get stuck into the nitty gritty. So thank you all for being on time. It's much appreciated. So I'm Chris Poore. I'm the program manager at Team Global and the executive committee member. We're joined today by Paul Adamson. So thank you very much to Paul for his time today. It's much appreciated. This webinar will be roughly from about 5 till 6 British Standard Time. And so it'll be broken down into a 15-minute briefing by Paul, followed by a 10-minute roughly interview, and then we'll roll into a Q&A. For anyone that has any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to message me directly through the chat function. The way that you do that is by going on participants and messaging me directly, rather than messaging the chat for everyone else to see. So without further ado, I think we'll get stuck in. Just as a forewarning, this session will be recorded. So if you want to keep your camera on, you're more than welcome, but all in fair warning. So thank you very much for everyone for joining us today. This webinar is put on by Team Global. Team Global was founded in 1958 as the European Atlantic Movement, and it is an independent and apolitical educational foundation. Team aims to enable young people to act as global citizens and to aspire.
So I just put a shirt and a jumper on for that.
Oh, sorry, Jamie. Thank you very much. Team aims to enable young people to act as global citizens and to aspire to leadership roles within their communities. We enable them to consider world issues and to take their part in resolving problems and promoting solutions. We recently established our student-led initiative, The International Perspective, in which a team of students are helping their peers and wider society to be more aware of international issues. Through webinars such as this, we are engaging students from across the UK to think globally on a range of issues from cybersecurity, global inequality, and in the case of this webinar, the UK's future relationship with the European Union. So as an introduction for Paul, Paul Adamson OBE is the chairman of Forum Europe, Forum Global, and the EU-UK Forum, as well as the founder of European Affairs Magazine Encompass, formerly known as eSharp. Alongside this, Paul is a member of RAND, Europe's Council of Advisors. Paul has a strong connection with education, occupying multiple positions, such as a visiting professor at the Policy Institute at King's College London, a patron of Academic Association of Contemporary European Studies, and a fellow of the UK Academy of Social Sciences. Alongside his OBE in 2012 for services for promoting an understanding of the European Union, Paul was further honoured by the French government in 2016 when he was named a Chevalier in the Ordre National du Mérite. Apologies for my French for anyone. Paul has had and continues to have a successful career in Brussels, with Politico describing him as the godfather of lobbying, in which the article describes MEPs queuing up to meet him, quote, the ultimate accolade for a lobbyist. Paul also runs a podcast called Paul Adamson in Conversation, in which he has informal conversations with personalities that have interesting things to say. Recent guests have included Gillian Tett, editor-at-large for the Financial Times, and Lord Ricketts, former chairman of the Joint Intelligence Committee and ambassador to NATO and France, which you can check out on all major platforms. Paul, without further ado, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you to Team Global for this invitation. I don't do that many speaking engagements, although people may not realize that. So you're very good at encouraging me to do this. I tend to be behind the scenes or moderating other people and asking the questions, not answering them. So I'll try and not let you down, Chris, in the next few minutes or so. I'm very happy to be here. It's great to engage with all of you. And I think we have maybe a broad common interest in the future of UK relations after Brexit. I've spent a lot of my working life, I'm more or less retired from that lobbying lark that Chris referred to in my CV, but I spent most of my working life on the side of trying to earn a living, trying to make the two sides, the UK and the EU, understand each other a bit better. I think I've clearly failed miserably in that exercise, otherwise we wouldn't have left the European Union. But anyway, one keeps trying, and I still haven't given up. But by way of background, let's remind ourselves that although the UK, the transition, so-called transition, expired at the end of last year, we actually left the European Union on the 31st of January last year. So we've been out for almost 2 years now. And that means, in effect, that we haven't had, obviously, a commissioner around the College of Commissioners table in the European Commission since then. We've lost all our MEPs, obviously, in the European Parliament, and the ministers who would normally come to take part in Council of Ministers meetings. And that's been quite a profound change. And that's been going on, I say, since the end of January last year. So we've been out for quite some time already, even though it's maybe because of things like COVID only sinking in now as we speak. The UK government is exercised, and by extension increasingly I find the rest of the UK world beyond the government, in three key things post-Brexit. One is and it's important we remind ourselves of these at regular intervals. I don't see myself as a professor or a teacher, but it's important that we remind ourselves some basic facts because they are important. One is the implementation of the so-called withdrawal agreement, of which the implementation of the Northern Ireland Protocol forms a very important integral part, which, as you know, is top of the news agenda this week, today with Lord Frost's speech in Lisbon, and tomorrow with the Commission's response to the UK's new ideas on how the NIP should be tweaked. Secondly, the implementation itself of what's called the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the TCA in the jargon, which is about all the things, the unfinished business, actually, that both sides acknowledge were not complete at the end of last year, despite the slogan that was put out a lot about get Brexit done, we've now left, Brexit is done, and we all know on this call, certainly, that is not accurate. And then last but not least, and something which is often sort of forgotten about or neglected, is just all of us in the UK context, not just the government, keeping tabs on the day-to-day business of the European Union, because we are still very much affected by all that, even though we are no longer a member of the club. And that is a major exercise in itself. Some people might say, well, we've left, why do we need to worry about Brussels anymore? Well, no, if you're a company, even if you're not exporting directly to the European Union, you're quite possibly part of a rather sophisticated supply chain, which ultimately does involve exports to the European market. So, for all those reasons, these are all major exercises, and we can, in themselves, about what the UK is now doing, spending more and more of its time doing. And we can talk about that maybe in the discussion afterwards. So, where does the UK's influence lie these days? I think even the most ardent Brexiter would recognise that we cannot, even if we wanted to, we cannot just turn our back on Brussels. It just does not make sense for all the most obvious reasons, some which I just alluded to. And I think, as I say, even the most ardent Brexiter would accept that, even if reluctantly so. So we need to still carry on, the UK, influencing or trying to influence events. And it's not made any easier by the current toxic political atmosphere that we're all very familiar with as I speak. But one has to keep a cool head, and one has to keep certainly a medium to longer term perspective, certainly, that's for sure. And that's one of the main reasons why I started just over a year ago something called the EU-UK Forum, which is very much non-partisan. It is not a campaign group trying to get us back into the European Union or all that kind of stuff. Other groups are out there doing that or trying to do that, but that's not the role of the EU-UK Forum. The EU-UK Forum is all about trying to keep channels of communication open, dialogue, constructive engagement on both sides, sometimes despite what the politicians are saying, not because of what the politicians are saying. And it's something I'm sure most, if not all of you on this call, I would hope share a very strong also commitment to. We have to keep the lines of communication open. And I'd like to maybe focus on one small thing before I finish, Chris, which is this idea: to what extent do we all have to accept what's, the French would call the finalité, the finality of Brexit? Is it really done and dusted, in the sense that people who aren't in government should wake up, smell the coffee, accept what the situation is, and go back to their day jobs, and not even spend any time more than they want to, frankly, thinking about the shape and the context and the evolution of the future EU-UK relationship. And I basically, and Chris kind of hinted at it in reading out bits of my CV, I've been in the past a lobbyist, if you like. I see myself a bit more as a strategist and looking for opportunities to shape things, and on behalf of the people who used to pay me, exert influence and just be constructive, obviously, and finding sensible ways to proceed. And what I find very striking with the British government at the moment is that they are saying, and they're no doubt from their point of view sincere, that in the context of the Northern Ireland Protocol, the NIP, it is not working, as they would say, and therefore we should reopen a discussion, a serious, quite a profound, they would argue maybe fundamental discussion about the NIP and how it's working, and with a view possibly, some people are rather suspicious, to its being replaced lock, stock and barrel. Well, if that kind of argumentation, rationale, applies to the NIP, then why not to other parts of the relationship between the EU-UK? It seems to me that the government cannot say, as a kind of general comment, that we can't talk about X or Y because that was all settled, quote unquote, when we ended the transition at the end of last year on the basis of a mutually agreed, signed and ratified trade and cooperation agreement. And I'd particularly like to talk about the case of Erasmus. I mean, many of you on the call are young students. The people I can see are maybe not so young and maybe not students, but those of you who haven't put your cameras on, I think a big chunk of you are young and you're studying, or you have been studying and you're carrying on studying. Now, as we all know, Erasmus, the student exchange program, for lots of different reasons, depending on who you ask the question to, has meant that the UK does not formally will carry on. I think there's a time lapse, and UK is, and students benefiting from the Erasmus program will stay in it till 2023, another 2 years or so. But depending, as I said, who you talk to, there's different takes on why the UK is no longer in the future Erasmus. And it strikes me that when there's still grounds without trying to maybe be over-optimistic and naive for a serious discussion about, maybe not right now because the politics are so toxic, as I said, but in the future. The Vice President of the European Commission dealing with us, the UK, on Brexit, as you all know, Maros Šefčovič, spoke to the College of Europe University in June before the summer. And in a long speech, he did say what is very true. With 73%, I quote Maros, with 73% of those aged 18 to 21 in the UK having voted Remain, it seems natural they would want the kind of exchange opportunities offered by Erasmus+. This is the key phrase. The UK government unfortunately declined to join it, but our offer is still on the table. Now, with the NIP, then the UK would be banging the table saying we insist on the NIP being renegotiated because it's not working. We want to come back to it. So why not, maybe not right now, maybe not this evening, but in the future, the UK, we could put pressure on the UK to think about rejoining at some point Erasmus. My simple point being, these things are not necessarily done and dusted. Now, one of the arguments, as you may know, but I think it's important, again, we know the facts, I've been doing some research about this recently, asking people lots of questions. One reason why the UK was reluctant to carry on its membership of Erasmus because they thought they weren't getting sort of value for money. And I think that's an objective fact that by all accounts, not that many UK students were applying for EU placings on the back of the program. And they felt, therefore, they weren't getting a good return on their investment. Maybe that's a bit transactional, but and it begs the question that maybe in the future, and it's too late now to worry about, what happened in the negotiations, which fell obviously at the last point when people couldn't agree, the two sides, that the Commission could say, let's be a bit more accommodating on the UK contribution to the Erasmus program. And otherwise, it's a missed opportunity. I can go into the pros and cons of the UK competing touring program, which is now being announced and launched, but that's another thing. It's important also to know, and it's not so much it's not public knowledge, but it's not been picked up by the media yet, but there is around the Northern Ireland Protocol some, in effect, collateral damage. And it's, again, I'm being a bit heavy about this, but it's important we know this, because if it's not reported in the media, if it's not reported in the media objectively, then people are fully entitled not to know about something, or at least the facts. The so-called Horizon Europe program, the multi-annual science and research cooperation agreement, which replaced the Horizon 2020 program recently. The UK has almost, not paradoxically, but ironically, asked to stay in that program, as well as the Copernicus program for space exploration and the Euratom research program. Now, the UK, I understand, and maybe people on the call can correct me, the UK is prepared to pay €2 billion a year, roughly, for continued membership of Horizon Europe. And they formally made that clear to the EU authorities, the European Commission, but the Commission, as we speak, has yet to formally agree and acknowledge that is the case. And there's a possibility, hopefully theoretical, not clear, not real, but still a possibility that at some point there'll be some kind of, not so much a dialogue of the deaf, but the two sides will not connect. And the government, the British government, said we waited almost a year for a positive response. Confirmation, they would argue, not even a response, and it hasn't been forthcoming, therefore we're going to walk away from it. Well, that obviously, clearly for a lot of people, would be a tragedy, because the UK involvement in Horizon Europe and its predecessor, to be more precise, has been quite extraordinary and influential, and everybody's benefit. And then finally, free movement. I'm not an expert on free movement of people, that's for sure. I'm not an expert on free movement of other aspects of free movement either. But there again, clearly the door has been shut on that in terms of the negotiations. But Chris referred to my online magazine recently, and I recently published an article by a professor in Bristol, Diego Acosta, where I urge you, maybe Chris can put the link in the chat or something afterwards. It's which to the effect that maybe a way forward on free movement is for countries, other EU member states, to do bilateral deals with the United Kingdom. So again, I'm just trying to give some signs of optimism without being too naive, hopefully at the same time, whereby we can carry on dialogue and discussion and keep some level of openness with our European partners, because they are, at the end of the day, they're not just European neighbours, they are European partners. And my final comment before I shut up, Chris, is that if anybody on this call and elsewhere say, well, we gave it our best shot, and I assume people on the call are broadly pro-European, although they haven't got to be, obviously. How does one, we gave it our best shot, we lost the result 5 years ago, but also we lost any campaigning or whatever we did subsequently, and we are where we are, that terrible phrase, but it's used all the time in this context. All I'm trying to say is that I was, as an expat living in Brussels, I was blown away by the images on more than one occasion when these marches for Europe took place in the United Kingdom, people coming down in busloads, cars, trains to assemble en masse in London. And that was extraordinary. And some non-British foreign commentators and politicians saying this is the biggest manifestation, expression of support for the European Union that we've ever seen in any country. in the European Union, which is quite ironical. So all I'm trying to say is that you may think you should move on and spend the rest of your life enjoying the rest of your life. And unless you're maybe a politics student dealing with the European Union, why should I bother? But I think it'd be a great missed opportunity if the young people on this call in particular and their friends, even if they're not doing political science or European Union studies, did not feel that they should keep that fervor, that enthusiasm, that ardor, and that commitment to being pro-European despite the result of the referendum 5 years ago. And I'll stop there.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Paul. And I'm just putting in the article link in the chat now for anyone that's interested. So there we are. And so, yeah, no, some brilliant points. Thank you very much. And so I'll roll on to the first question. And as mentioned in the introduction, Politico named you the godfather of lobbying or strategism, as you kind of alluded to. So in the article, it mentioned that that you joined in the sort of early 1980s, and what would you say was the landscape different in Brussels previously to that, and would you say that lobbyists or strategists have changed it for the better? What are your thoughts on that one?
I came to this town, Brussels, 40 years ago, which is extraordinary. I think about it. Unemployed, by the way. Nobody gave me a job. Maybe that resonates with some people on this call in 2021. Some of us have been there before. That's why I began working for myself, because I couldn't find an employer. The things are obviously, to be serious, Chris, things have changed enormously in 40 years, obviously. More member states, the powers of the institution of the EU have grown enormously. And there have been more and more players moving into Brussels. If you walk down any street in Brussels, certainly around the what's called the European Quarter, where the Commission is located and the Council of Ministers and many delegations, almost everybody you see, apart from the odd barista and coffee shop person, is some form of lobbyist. It's not just the private sector corporations and their trade associations. As you know, it's also the member states themselves. They lobby on behalf of themselves, their governments, charities, the whole civil society world, NGOs, trade unions, and so on and so on. So the sheer number of players has gone up, stratospherically, obviously, in those 40 years, and which has put a premium on getting people to listen to you. I hate if I say access, that conjures up all sorts of things about getting access, but it's getting people to listen to your arguments is quite tricky, because it's more and more problematical, because people are so busy. Everybody has so much time in their daily lives, and making sure that your arguments stand out from the crowd and get listened to is becoming more and more of a challenge.
Brilliant, thank you. And I suppose we've had our issues over here in the UK with lobbying within the sort of Grenfell scandal, in which David Cameron found himself in some hot water. Do you think that lobbyists or strategists get a bad rap for what they do, or do you think sometimes it's deserved?
Well, I'm not going to defend that, but it's none of us know. But I think in the Brussels context, I can't talk about London or even Washington for that matter in terms of being a player there. But in the Brussels world, which I'm most familiar, obviously, there's very little. I'm not saying there's zero, and there may be a lot of stuff going on, obviously, to which I'm not privy. But it's just not. It doesn't work that way. There are no kind of heavily funded campaigns. Obviously, more and more corporations are coming to Brussels because the EU tentacles, the regulatory tentacles, spread far and wide, and so they have to be here and know and find out what's going on and seek to influence policy. But that has always been the case. But it's done, I think, in a very proper way. Some companies may spend a lot of money on that if they have the resources, but that in itself is not sort of a suspect. It just means that they have deeper pockets. And I don't think there's a direct correlation. I'm sure an NGO would not agree with me on that, but I would like to defend it up to a point. There's no direct correlation with the amount of money you spend on lobbying and its ultimate impact. Often NGOs have better access. Some would argue rightly so, even with more limited resources, because policymakers make an effort to make sure that side of the argument is well listened to and represented in discussions on future policy.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And I noticed on the 12th of September 2012, you wrote an article for Politico in which it was called "Selective Engagement Does the UK No Favours," in which you argue that British Conservatives at the time trying to renegotiate the country's relationship with the EU are losing sight of the bigger picture. Obviously, a bit of foreshadowing in that. Would you say that Brexit was inevitable, and would you say that Europeans were really surprised when we voted to leave?
Yeah, you got a better memory. I'm so impressed you dug that out from some yellowing file somewhere covered with dust. I know in the digital world we don't have yellow files and dust. I know that. But go back to some of the facts, because we have not so much we have short memories, but things crowd into our brains and displace existing stuff because we can't keep it all in our heads at the same time. Remember something called, without being too turgid, the Balance of Competences Review, when as a precursor to David Cameron, then Prime Minister, opening discussions about a possible future relationship with the European Union, did this cross-Whitehall exercise of asking different departments to, as scientifically and as objectively and impartially as possible, assess the benefits or not of membership of the European Union as far as that particular department's interests were concerned. And on balance, the balance of competencies came to the view that it was a good thing, surprise, surprise. One or two cabinet ministers no longer in government tried to suppress or at least delay publication of some of these assessments because they didn't come out with the results that those particular cabinet ministers wanted. But that is, if you ask anybody who's involved in the exercise almost 10 years ago, as I say, leading up as a preparation, if you like, for Cameron's pre-negotiation with the EU, would argue that that's what happened. And it was an objective, I think, by all accounts, objective exercise conducted by civil servants with very little political interference. And it was, yes, you say, I'm not sure it's prescient, but it was a foretaste of the kind of cherry-picking cakeism, as we say these days, approach that many politicians have in the UK, but also, to be fair to the UK and other member states, to the idea of membership of the EU. Let's just take out the bits we like and ignore or not accept or whatever, or downplay the things we don't quite want to buy into. And that is, as you know, the problem of the construction of the European Union. People think they can just latch on to whatever they want and not do the rest. And in terms of could we have predicted it? I'm not going to rehearse the arguments of why we all left, why the UK left 5 years ago, and people say fair enough that it behoves the Remainers to show some sensitivity and some appetite for understanding the other side of the argument. Not so much the people leading the Leave campaign, because they had a different kind of agenda, but those people who voted Leave, especially in poorer communities, they did it for quite clear reasons, and the Remainers have to understand and spend some time appreciating why those people did that, because in their view it was very, very legitimate. A lot is said about the role of the media, as you know, in the UK, how it influences and distorts the political debate in Britain on the European Union. And as an expat, I've never really, I'm probably the least best placed to opine on that. But I am, it sounds a bit sort of silly, but I am still shocked when I go to the UK or see online some of the blaring headlines about Brussels bashing. But I'd like to think that on that one, it's having less traction, but maybe I'm being naive when I say that. And to the extent that younger people don't read newspapers, they get their information via the sources of social media. The power, but maybe this is maybe wishful thinking on my part, the power of these rather sensationalist and inaccurate reporting of the European in certain media, you know what I'm talking about, will go down as the years go by. But who knows? Who knows?
Thank you very much. I suppose you mentioned sort of the cherry picking of the EU at the moment. We're seeing some issues coming out of Poland with their judicial system. Do you think that it's up to the EU to evolve and to accommodate such issues rather than being sort of stuck in the mud on some issues? And if you do think that it needs to evolve, how do you think that would happen, given sort of the bureaucratic nature of some of the institutions?
I think what we often forget including myself, by the way, something fundamental about the European Union is each member state has joined for different reasons. People have not all joined for the same reason. It might be clusters, maybe, to be fair, of countries. But it's north, south, east, west member states join for different reasons, and that's why it's a constant exercise trying to bring people around the table to agree. They don't have a common view on why, shared common view throughout, on why they joined the club in the first place. And it's very strange. If you join the tennis club, you join because you want to play tennis, and that's all that's being offered. But when you join the European Union, it's quite a menu of sort of options. And going back to the earlier point about cherry picking, current member states think that they can just choose from the menu. There's lots of these food analogies, aren't there, when it comes to EU membership? Choose from the menu and leave the rest. And of course, that becomes a debate, well, amongst other people. And I think the way forward is, and that might be a way back in for the United Kingdom, but not for the foreseeable future, is for different levels of membership, different types of membership. It's not a new debate, as you know. People on the call who are political science students and graduates know that this kind of concentric circle or two-speed Europe type stuff has been around forever. People are not quite sure. It sounds very tantalizing in the current political climate, because it's better to have that kind of accommodation rather than asking people to leave, because it's quite difficult to get people to leave, or forcing people to leave by making it so untenable that they have no desire to stay in. And that's, as you know, the debate at the moment around about Poland. I was thinking briefly, seeing the images of the weekend, and with a certain kind of almost envy, how all these people came out, not just young people, essentially young people in Poland, to show their support for EU membership. And we had that in the UK, as I said earlier, but only after we just voted to leave. And so it's quite a good thing that the government in Poland sees a mass protest, or mass manifestation, at least, of support for European Union membership. We'll see whether it has any impact on the behaviour of the Polish government.
Yeah, and you mentioned sort of the young people trying to boost the case for EU membership. Obviously, as UK citizens, or as many of us are, we're not able to take part in things like Erasmus anymore, or things such as even interrailing become a little bit more difficult than they were before. How can UK students continue to engage with their European counterparts and still feel part of that European family?
Yeah. It's really important, isn't it? Because we're not talking at all actually about, falling in love with the institutions and the procedures and even the policies and all that kind of stuff. The European, we're talking about being part of a shared continent and the desire to move and travel. And we all know, as I said when I was quoting Maros Šefčovič just now, we all know that younger people, again, it's empirical, it's fact. I'm not making political points. Young people by a very wide margin are pro-European, because they are pro-open, and they are less racist and less xenophobic than older people. This is apparently fact. 5 years ago, I'm trying to avoid mentioning too much, going back over the Brexit referendum, but until the age of about 45, there was a majority in favour of remaining. Only after people got to sort of middle age that they started having more stronger views about leaving the European Union. So unless, as young people, as they get older, they could become a bit more reactionary, which is possible, or less pro-European, one has to place some faith in the fact that young people today are much more pro-European, which is why I think I was very conscious in my opening remarks. I had no sort of magic formula, but I just wanted to kind of sow a seed in people's mind that let's not lose faith or hope. There are ways let's together work out ways to engage, and let's not, without sounding like some third-rate superannuated anarchist, let's find ways alongside government to do things we want to do, either put pressure on government or do things ourselves. There's no ban on, well, COVID restrictions notwithstanding, on travel, on falling in love with somebody from another country. It's made a bit difficult with the restrictions on freedom of movement, but there are ways that young Europeans as well as older ones, certainly young Europeans can connect with, and that's really, really important. And I think I feel it very strongly, and I'm sure the people on this call as well, that we as Brits do not feel that we have become insane and anti-European and just less open as a society. The vote was what it was, but we want to engage. And things like my forum and many other organizations, I'm sure, are all about trying to just create those opportunities. They may have no legal status, they may have no formal status as we speak in terms of obliging the UK government to listen and to take stock and to respond accordingly. However, we just have to keep these channels of communication, as I said, open. And those on the call who think, well, I've done it, now it's all over, I need to go back to my studies, to my internship, to my job, looking for a job, whatever. Please don't just do that. Please find ways to keep showing that we the UK are part of the European family.
Brilliant. And a final question from me before we jump into some questions from the audience. We kind of touched on it before. Working in Europe as well as visiting is an aspiration for many UK students, including myself. Now that we're a third country, what's the best way that one can still jump across the channel rather than just for a holiday?
I'm sure I'm too young to know this, but before membership of the European Union, people did travel to the continent. We didn't wait for the EU membership before doing that. And now I think, don't ask me any visa advice or passport advice and insurance advice, all that kind of stuff. That's not my job. But a priori, I think there's still an appetite for employers and to take on Brits. A lot of these things can become self-fulfilling and received wisdom that Brits are no longer welcome outside in Europe, in the European Union, in Brussels, certainly where I live. And that's not true. We have to keep engaging. I mean, in parallel, just to remind the audience, in case they didn't know this, the CBI is still a member of its European-wide association, Business Europe. The Trade Union Congress is still part of the ETUC. All the sectoral UK organizations that I'm aware of, such as Tech UK, which is obviously technology companies, are part of their respective European organizations. And I think that same applies for the broad civil society world. None of these groups, these European groups, have asked the UK members to leave on the back of our departure from the European Union. So all those affiliations, all those memberships, all those engagements are still very much alive and need to be nurtured and pursued.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Paul. So we'll jump into some Q&As now. So the first one came from Hannah, and she said that you mentioned sort of the idea of being a strategist and looking for opportunities. Do you see that there could be any space or opportunity for those that narrowly missed out on voting due to perhaps not being able to vote because of missing out on age, to remain as an EU citizen without official classification in any way? I know that this is a frustration for many young people.
Yeah. Again, I stress I'm not an expert on this, but and we here in Belgium, there's a system, I'm being awfully vague, but whereby the Belgian government has agreed that UK citizens living in Belgium have basically full rights. Again, the people on the call know more about it than I do. It's called the M card, is it? So I think that first, my advice to Hannah and other people is to look at that case, that situation. They're not already aware of it, maybe they already are, and just again going back to strategy stuff. If it can apply in one area, but in one country, if one country can offer that, then why not others? Going back to Erasmus, sorry, it's not quite the question you asked, Hannah, but going back to my Erasmus point, my understanding is that the Scotland and Wales are going to be offering some kind of Erasmus type thing going forward. And as you know, the Republic of Ireland have offered to Northern Ireland young people through their good offices membership or availability to apply for Erasmus type schemes. So it's just England which is not part of it. So that's an interesting way of looking at it as well, to the extent to which I'm changing the question, Hannah, forgive me, how the devolved administrations are showing some creativity, should we say, when it comes to things like Erasmus. And so it's all about, well, maybe you're teasing me about using the word now strategist, but you find examples, even they're quite small, which apply in one area, and see to what extent they can be extrapolated elsewhere. And to go back to Hannah's question again, look around where you see possibilities of one, a member state like Belgium I just mentioned. And from memory, I think somebody's put something in the chat, but I'm not trying to read it. The Diego Acosta article that you kindly put on the chat link, Chris, refers to maybe we can start with Spain, the UK and Spain, since there are so many UK retirees in Spain, and then you build on that. It's according to the author, the article was clearly an expert and thought a lot about this, not me, but he has. It is perfectly feasible to think it is not a ridiculous idea. So read the article, all of you, and draw your own conclusions.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Paul. The next question comes in from Maximilian, and I'll combine his question with Ashley's. Maximilian asks, to what extent has the pandemic skewed the perception of Brexit in terms of its economic impact? He sort of referenced the recent lorry driver shortage, and sort of what was to blame. Is there potential sort of that the pandemic made Brexit worse, or Brexit was going to be okay, but the pandemic created these issues? I know that you mentioned previously that the media likes to skew certain things, so feel free to answer on any of those points.
I'm trying very hard, as I hope you appreciate, to sort of behave myself and not try and score cheap points against people who may have voted. Not so much people who voted Leave, but people who are campaigning for Leave and using some of these arguments. I sense, but again, I'm not at the coalface, that the tide is slowly turning in the UK, in the sense that you see even on the Brexit supporting media every now and again some recognition that Brexit is at least part of the reason for some of these phenomena, like the lorry driver shortages. I think it's too much to say, okay, that it's only exclusively the result of Brexit. Fair enough. I think we can agree on that. But I think what's very frustrating and just inaccurate is like that blanket denial that Brexit has had zero impact or influence on what we are seeing in the UK now, which from my perspective is quite extraordinary. Okay, let's not go down this rabbit hole of saying, and we just fail to agree because it's so black and white. Yeah, it's all because of Brexit. It's not at all because of Brexit. Let's be a bit more nuanced and sophisticated and say that part of the reason surely is Brexit related, and that has to be acknowledged. And you see, there are quite signs, not just telltale signs, clear signs that in the media and some of the commentariat certainly that is now increasingly being recognised. But maybe yes, I'm being a bit premature when I say that.
I suppose that kind of comes off Ellie's question in terms of, she asked, do you believe it's possible that for the UK to actually make a success of Brexit, or is it completely off the table?
No, it's a good exercise for people like me to try and get that kind of mind exercise. I think what's extraordinary, and this sounds again like in a lack of impartiality, but what little effort the Leave campaigners have devoted to articulating that very point. I mean, it's not only do you see increasingly, and you see that in Whitehall, the civil servants who are doing enormous great, and the UK mission here to the European Union, enormous effort and creativity, intelligence, dedication, hard work to finding solutions to the current situation in all that, not just in Northern Ireland Protocol, but across the board. And it'd be great, frankly, and it sounds like a cynical or kind of a kind of challenge to the Leave group. Not at all. It'd be very gratifying if the people who spent so much time before, not just during the campaign, the referendum campaign 5 years ago, but in the past, ever since we joined in, for some people who haven't given up, saying that the EU was a bad thing and we're better off outside it. Or the EU is a bad thing for the UK, to be more precise and more fair, and we're better off outside it. Well, why don't these same people then spend a similar amount or even a small amount of that energy just telling us what the case could be? I mean, in very broad terms, to try and answer your question, Chris, you can say, yes, we can make our own rules on the future industry world we're going to be living in, the technology world. artificial intelligence or life sciences, all that kind of thing. Fine. Well, let's try and find people who are going to say that, rather than just to say things like, we want control of our fish or we want control of our borders. They don't articulate, which I find quite extraordinary, a positive vision, even if it's not necessarily detailed, about what this new world is about. And I say it in a totally I stress, in a totally non-facetious way. Please give us some ideas, even if they're not specific, or even if they are not for the immediate future. At least give us some idea what, in rather than not just in broad brush, blah 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 terms, of what this post-Brexit world can be for the UK, and why we should take comfort in it and celebrate it. Please do it.
Yes, no, definitely. And I suppose that kind of goes on to Michael's point, in terms of, he mentions that even when the UK joined the common market, there wasn't exactly that full commitment from the UK that you might have got from other member states. And he mentions out the limited participation in the Erasmus program. And also he says that it was not only with Brexit that so many seemed to discover that they were European and valued the UK's membership of the EU as well. Do you have any points on that one?
Well, it's true that it's been a received wisdom for a long time, as we all know on this call, that the UK has been a reluctant and often a member of, and a reluctant partner in the European Union, and that's probably true. I'm not going to argue that, but I would say, like before, that's not unique. This idea that the UK is uniquely obstreperous. So we had more baggage, of course. We felt we could do things more easily on our own compared to some member states, all the things we think and I'm not even talking about our position in the world 100 years ago. I'm talking about things like, the key role we play in NATO, members of the United Nations Security Council, permanent members thereof, and so on and so on. Our weight in the world, we kind of can say up to a point that, we are different from British exceptionalism, but from the rest of the European Union. But again, I stress, certainly the larger member states, a lot of them also think that they are a bit different, and certainly, and rightly so, because that's what their job is, looking out to get the best possible. I'm talking about the politicians, obviously, the best possible deal for their own citizens, and that's what politicians do and should do. So the UK is not necessarily unique in that case. It's true that, but then again, maybe do other member states do it better? We haven't made the case. I mean, we never really, I don't think that somebody on the call can correct me, but can confirm more than I, we've never been net recipients of the EU budget. So if you're a member state, whether big or small, new or older, and you're getting money every year, more than you pay in, that helps enormously to build support and affection for, if you like, or certainly tolerance of the European Union in a way that was never available to the United Kingdom, because we were always net contributors. I'm not saying that Margaret Thatcher was right talking about getting our money back, but the juste retour argument all those years ago. But one has to say at some point, there has to be some idea, some reason why people are so supportive. And you saw it actually in the case of certain countries when they were net recipients for several years, rightly so, because they were poorer than some of their European partners. But then when other new member states arrived who were even poorer, that first group started not receiving the same amounts of money from the budget, and they became very disaffected by that and less pro-European. So there is something of a connection, frankly, with that being too transactional, between getting money out of the budget in net terms and support for your country's membership.
And I suppose you sort of mentioned about different member states throwing their weight around and trying to get the best value, I suppose, for money out of the EU. What do you see? Anthony asked, what sort of are the main challenges facing the EU in the future? We touched upon it previously, but do you think it's the issue with perhaps the failing democracies in Hungary or Poland, as we touched upon, or sort of outside of the EU in terms of China or Russia? I suppose that might fall under sort of NATO as well, or is it sort of the migration issues as well? What do you think are the main issues?
Well, yeah, it's quite a long list, isn't it? I mean, the rule of law argument debate is hugely important. Obviously, it's very topical, And it's creating a lot of bad blood, as you know, around the table of heads of state. Well, not forget so much about members of the European Parliament or the Commission, but European leaders, when they come together at the European Council at regular intervals, one senses that there's much less, maybe one exaggerated it before through rose-colored spectacle. There was much in the past, bigger sense of solidarity and common purpose and all that kind of stuff. And now you see a lot of antagonism, and what is tangentially what is worrying for the EU is the fact that some of these more antagonistic, for want of a better phrase, member states, who I'm talking about, they realize they're not going to leave. They don't want to leave, despite the current discussion with Poland, for example, Hungary. After Brexit, people saying you'll see one by one, like dominoes, all these other countries will join the UK in leaving. No. And for a short time, the EU institutions took the EU more broadly took some sort of kind of ill-advised comfort in that. When people realized, no, it's not a good idea, because whether Marine Le Pen in France or even Orban in Hungary, that wasn't what the people wanted. However, if you're going to stay inside, and if you're a current member state and you're antagonistic to the basic ideals, that is arguably, one could say, more dangerous for the European Union, because what's better, having a member state leave who is being antagonistic, or having a member state refusing to leave and carrying on being antagonistic? That's the question to ask very bluntly. Then the broader issue, certainly. I'm told that the euro is going into crisis mode quite sooner rather than later. The stability pact needs to be looked at seriously, because there are major discrepancies there. The migration certainly is there. It comes in waves. So that's kind of an intended pun, by the way, in cycles, and it's always there on our shores, literally on our shores, on the shores of the key member states. So there are always issues there. The only other problem for the European Union, and it's a very difficult balance, and it's a bit more controversial if I say this, is between having self-confidence and having a sense of purpose, and not being seen as a junior partner, if you like, compared to the other big blocs in the world. You mentioned the US and China, and at the same time not being too hubristic. And I have a lot of sympathy for the European Union when they're trying to, they often say in the same sentence, or even think that maybe that we are a poor relation to these big blocs, economically, politically. At the same time, we think we should be taken more seriously. We are leaders. We are moral leaders when it comes to climate change and European values. That whole debate. I think that is an ongoing thing. At a pinch, one can always solve the migration crisis theoretically, the economic crisis theoretically, but this sense of how the EU pitches itself on the world stage, I think is going to be an ongoing story.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Paul. Sahel has asked if he can ask the question on the mic, so I'd like to invite him up.
Hello, I'm not Sahel.
Can I just say, it's nice to see some young faces on the screen. It's wonderful. No disrespect to my other friends who are my age, but it's all the young people decided to keep their cameras off. They're probably not presentable, but anyway, nice to see you guys.
Go ahead. So there's been a lot of chat about the Northern Ireland Protocol in this call. So being from the place, I have a question on that. A large part of our political leadership are saying that the protocol as it is now undermines our place in the UK. And I was wondering if you thought that was a credible argument or not. Do you think the protocol as it is now undermines Northern Ireland's place in the UK?
I'm not an expert, but I don't think it does, honestly. And I'm not just saying that because otherwise my European credentials will be damaged. I genuinely don't think it's an issue. I mean, obviously, as we all know, and I'm trying again not to rehearse old debates now, settle, quote unquote, but the May deal was quite different, the backstop, whereas the Johnson deal created the current situation with the border in the Irish Sea. So, and cutting off, quote unquote, GB from Northern Ireland. And you could argue up to a point that but the Northern Ireland politicians kind of refuse to see it this way. And unlike the business community, which does see it this way, is that they have the best of both worlds. They are part of the UK customs area, but they're also part of the the single market, the EU single market. So, and that's something that I find Northern Ireland politicians have great difficulty and reluctance in acknowledging and in articulating, which is a great shame. So I don't think it is, as you say, what these politicians are saying, giving different kind of status to Northern Ireland. The reality is this deal was struck. You could argue, then maybe I'm showing maybe less impartiality, that the UK side didn't quite think it through, or they did think it through, but chose to kind of kick the can down the road until crisis time, which is now. But to all intents and purposes, everybody agreed this is going to be a good deal for all parties concerned. And so where's the problem?
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And we've got one final question from Lawrence, a nice sort of positive one to end it off on. What advice would you give to Remainers to prepare for the future, whether that's the UK in or out of the EU, and how might we go about mending that relationship that we have with Europe?
Yeah. I feel like maybe I sense your pain, Lawrence, but it is a great frustration for everybody. I say, unless you're a Brexiter by definition, but if you're not a Remainer, that there's almost like a torched earth strategy in the government to a certain extent, where we take all these metaphors, we take no prisoners or whatever. The key, as I said earlier in my opening remarks, I think the key is to keep these channels of communication open, to remind both sides. And we have lots of friends, despite what you might think sometimes in the UK. We have lots of friends on the continent. They know that we are good people. We are pro-European. We are open, not just to Europe, but the rest of the world, especially the younger generation. And all of us have to find ways. And I think that's more and more, not just urgent, but becoming kind of a received wisdom almost, that we should not allow politicians of whatever stripe dictate 100% the tenor and shape of relations with our European partners. We are entitled, all of us as citizens, to keep these relationships in congenial and positive, constructive. As one very renowned professor, Chris Gray, says quite often in his missives, the Leavers maybe won the vote 5 years ago, but they did not win the right to destroy relations between the United Kingdom and the European Union. That was not what they won the right to do.
Thank you very much, Paul. And that comes to all of the questions. We managed to fit all of that into 1 hour. So congratulations to everyone. And thank you very much to Paul and to everyone that's joined us here live today. I'd like to remind everyone that the webinar is recorded, so we'll be uploading it to our social media channels shortly.
Chris, can I just plug? I'm here to plug, obviously.
Yes, go ahead.
UK Forum, eukforum.com. It's free membership, point one. My magazine online is free as well. You just and sign on to get the regular newsletter, and my podcasts every 2 weeks, and they are all free as well. You can sign on to get alerts for them as well. That was shameless marketing. Sorry, Chris.
No worries, Paul. And just to help you out, I'll just put them all in the chat for everyone as well, in case anyone wants to go check them out. But thank you very much, Paul. And thank you very much on behalf of team. I hope you have a lovely evening. Thank you for spending the hour with us. And thank you to everyone for coming. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you, Chris.